So good evening, everyone. We're just going to give it maybe another minute. People are actively joining, so we'll be back in a minute and we'll start the webinar. So good evening, everyone, and welcome to this evening's webinar. Dennis Howard is my name, and we're very lucky to be joined by Tommy Heffernan, a well-known vet with a huge interest in calf rearing and calf health, and probably more than that is calf performance. So I suppose we're at that time of year now, and everyone's thoughts are turning to calves arriving soon. I suppose this is the time of year where we curse short gestation. That we'd like as long as possible to maybe get a bit of extra time off, but there's not much we can do about it. When they start arriving, they start arriving. So I'm very much looking forward to hearing Tommy this evening. As I said, he's a big interest in calf health, lots of knowledge, and I suppose the big thing with Tommy, I think, is he always offers really practical solutions, and he's big into setting up practical, simple systems that will hopefully lead to very good calf rearing. So, Tommy, I'm going to hand over to you. And just before I do, I suppose we're going to have a couple of polls, three polls throughout Tommy's presentation. So, when they're up, please participate. So they're going to be interesting to see what the results are. And also, we're very much looking forward to answering all your questions at the end. So just use the chat box. So if you think of any question along the way, type it in as you're going along, and we will get to it. We'll get to as many as possible then at the end. So, okay, Tommy, I'll hand over to you.
Thanks very much, Dennis. Quick introduction to myself. Look, I'm delighted to be here this evening. I'm calling myself a veterinary consultant, but I have a big interest in calf rearing. So, as Dennis said, it's that time of year ahead of calving to have a little think about what calving entails, what we can do a little bit different. One thing I suppose I've learned about calf health over the last while is that, a lot of the things I'm saying are the same things we've been saying maybe 10 years ago, 20 years ago. So, what way can we think about things a little bit differently? And if we keep saying the same things, they might be important. But look, I'm very much involved in a company called Precision Microbes. I briefly mentioned it as well. It's my key role at the moment, but it allows me to travel a lot, and I'm on farms nearly every week in Ireland, the UK, and even further afield. And I get to meet interesting people, and I see kind of different systems and how they work. Huge thank you to Munster Bovine for having me along. These weekly webinars are excellent. I've tuned into a few of them myself, so I'm delighted to take part in one and speak. Really, as well, I love questions. So if there's something you agree with, disagree with, I haven't made sense on, please type in the chat box. We'd love to answer questions after. So, okay, let's set the scene. I suppose first of all, always start on a positive note. When you look at, there's lots of stuff on the farming side, from nitrates to Mercicort, whatever it is that there's lots of positives out there. If you look at our mortality rates and calf rearing, let's say nationally compared to other European countries, and I see this when I travel, we're doing quite a good job on calves. We've made significant improvements. And if I look at March, if you pick the month of March and look at the number of pre-weaned calves on Irish farms, like we've probably more calves in that month than any country in Europe, regardless of cow numbers. So we've a lot of cows coming, or calves coming at the one time. Another trend I think I'd like to always highlight to farmers when I get a chance is there's a real, I think, shift back to the value of animal protein from a human health perspective. That's our business, whether it's milk, cheese, yogurt, or meat we're producing. And I think that's a really important thing. And I think I always say, like, very important as well. I was very lucky to do a no-field scholarship where I looked at kind of dairy farming and calf health, and perception is still really important. And the dairy calf is an important part of our system, whether we're rearing them or we're selling them. From a consumer perspective, as an exporter as well, it's really key. So lots of positives out there when we think about the future of farming. And why are we rearing calves? Look, we look at heifers, we look at the economics. It's really important to understand that this first 12 weeks is incredibly influential for the future lifetime performance. We know that if we can do a good job pre-weaning, well, that will lead to more milk in the tank. Even for our beef calves, good pre-weaning is still really important from production and efficiency point of view. Some people are doing it because they love genetics, it's a passion. I see so many different drivers for calf health. Some people, calf health's a real struggle. We have to. So I think systems become really important then if you struggle with calf rearing. But what matters, and I want to kind of focus on tonight, is this idea, we've made such improvements, we can make more, but looking at the long-term view of this 12-week period. Sometimes when you're in it, it's very easy to farm on a PowerPoint, I know that. But when you're in the system, it's very difficult to kind of see beyond it. But these first 12 weeks set the calf up for future lifetime performance. So I like to dabble in a little bit of psychology, and when I think about when we're trying to look at the outcomes, what are we trying to achieve? What's our end goal? Healthy calves. What does that mean? So we're trying to look at average daily gain, and that's more important than we think. We want a well-growing calf in the first 10 to 12 weeks of life. And that's really important from a health perspective, but also it indicates, that future lifetime performance, that metabolic health. It's interesting about the calf. In the first 50 days, the organ cells will double if the calf is metabolically primed correctly. Now, the calf will grow, has compensatory growth, but those cells will never double again. Now, there's a very important organ when we think about that function. It's the mammary gland. It's the organ that pays the bill. So all of this is why we see a lot of focus on, getting heifers right for future lifetime performance. We want to reduce disease, we want to reduce antibiotics, we want to double birth weight or a little bit more at weaning time. These are all the outcomes, okay? We know where we need to be. But I think I spent a lot of time thinking about, well, what are the key things that are going to get us to that outcome? And I'll talk a little bit about that tonight. What are the processes and routines? What are, as I call them, the pillars of management that drive calf health? They're the same ones you've heard over and over again. I think I have about 7 of them there, but they're really important. Also, when we think about calf disease, we know that it's an economic cost. So calf scour, 80% of the disease in the first 3 to 4 weeks is calf diarrhea. Then calf pneumonia becomes a challenge. And while there's economics, so if a calf has pneumonia, we know that damaged lungs, some of these heifers won't make it into their first and second lactation. They're circa costing us, 1,600 to 1,700 euros to rear them. So we want to reduce these diseases from an economic impact. But there's a real I think in seasonal systems, and I see it from being on farms, that there's a time cost to calves that none of us have or want to be there. There's nothing as frustrating as dealing with sick calves. So sometimes maybe I frame it wrong or right, that I frame calf health around the most valuable resource we probably have aside from our own health is time. So that's why I'm always pushing for people for simple routines, repeatable things, and prevention where possible. So we have a seasonal system. I don't need to tell anyone that, but when we think about the system, it's important. I don't think I've ever been in a perfect farm. Maybe it's yet to come the day. I'm not a perfect person. So farming is so many variables with weather and challenges and different things. But I do always stick to this rule. If we can't have perfection, we certainly should aim for progress, making small changes over time. And no matter what farm you go onto and calf shed you go into, every farm is slightly different. The genetics may be a little bit different. The shed position, as simple as that, will be different. Feeding regimes will be different. The amount of time and labour that's on farm can be different. And a very important rule as well tonight, if something's working for you and I say something different, don't be changing. If it's not broken, don't fix it. When we think about the calf rearing system, everyone loves a three-legged stool or simple ways of thinking about things. So when we think about calf health, there's really three core elements to it. The calf itself, the immunity, the metabolic health of the calf, etc. The environment the calf is in, really important. Challenging in seasonal conditions, we'll talk about that. But often forgotten is the people and the routines. I think that's got a massive impact on that. And I spent 16 years in vet practice, and I always remember when I started really engaging in the whole prevention thing. We'd all love to have new calf sheds, and I was working with a particular client who was getting sick calves year on year. And I suppose I started thinking a little bit differently, and I said, look, there's an old hay shed there. It's going to be a little bit of work, but currently the calf disease management plan is not working. They're too close to the cows. The structure is not right. With a bit of effort and time, this particular lady, she put straw bales into an old shed, square bales. They were lucky they were a tillage farm. They had lots of straw. They started feeding whole milk. They were just not getting milk replacement right, putting gates up. And with poor infrastructure to the outside eye, she probably reared her best calves ever and some of the best calves I've ever seen since then. So sometimes it's not always about infrastructure. We have to think about the routines. And that's why I think people is really important. So this is kind of the idea of health and disease. So I suppose as a young vet, I was very interested in disease and treating disease. Since I've left practice, I'm kind of more interested in health and what drives health. So a lot of farms will have a lot of the pathogens we talk about, be it respiratory disease, scour pathogens. They're endemic. This is not a scary word. There could be some low levels of them there. Something triggers them. We see disease. So that's why I'm always so focused on kind of the health aspect. And I'm going to talk a lot about this tonight. And this is the seesaw, the balancing act. So if we're trying to reduce infection pressure, this is a really simple diagram, but it's really kind of key. Whether it's mastitis, infectious disease, we're seeing mastitis, pneumonia, anything. We're trying to drive up immune function. Everything we can do to improve immunity, we're going to do it. Infection pressure then is the amount of bugs animals are exposed to. And when we think about calf health, this is really key. And in seasonal calving systems, this is our challenge. We have more numbers coming, weather is getting variable. The calves become the multipliers of disease. So obviously every disease has to start with some source. We talk about the sheds and cleaning out sheds, but ultimately our cows and older animals, particularly our cows, will have small levels of disease in their systems, be it fecal disease or respiratory diseases, and they're shedding small amounts of it. They've developed immunity to them. And the problem is the calves are very immunonaive. That's why we talk about colostrum so much. And they're taking in these pathogens. They may not be getting clinically sick for the first weeks, but then we hit a point where infection pressure, the amount of bugs the calves are shedding themselves, overcomes even if we do a good job in immunity. So I'm going to constantly go back to this idea of immunity and infection pressure, because when we see disease, one of this table is tipped. Something's impacted immunity or infection pressure has just got to a point where the immune system can't deal with it. So I actually have done a lot of webinars, but I haven't done polls before. So this is new to me tonight. So this is our first poll. And I think Dennis is going to talk about the poll and tell you how to fill it in. And at the end of this slide, we'll come back to discuss the results.
Great, Tommy. So this one is just about testing colostrum. So it should be coming up on your screen there now shortly. Maeve is going to put it up. So do you test colostrum? So what we mean by that is with a refractometer, and Tommy will maybe go into it in a bit more detail. So yes, I test more than 80% of the samples. Yes, I do a little bit of testing, test the occasional sample, or no, I don't test at all. So we're talking about the refractometer. So let you drive on and talk away, Tommy, and I'll come back with the answer there maybe at the end of the slide.
Okay, brilliant. Okay, so everyone is bored about colostrum. Mother of God, another vet talking about colostrum. We've heard it all, and there's a reason. If you have a house, you need a foundation, and colostrum's foundational to calf health. Okay, so I'm not going to labour on the things you've heard many times before. What's interesting about the testing part of colostrum is we're testing quality. But let's go back and see what drives quality first of all. So if we think about colostrum, it's different to milk. It's different to transition milk. It's twice the fat and protein. The cow is spending 3 or 4 weeks prepping this in her udder. She's putting the immunoglobulins, which are basically the memory of disease she has from her lifetime in the farm, into these antibodies, into colostrum to pass to the calf. We know this. We know that, okay, this is really important. The difference, we get our antibodies through the placenta, humans, but calves are different. Ruminants are different. They need this first milk. So when we test colostrum quality on farm, we're looking to see a certain level on the Brix refractometer. And I was challenged on this recently, and I thought it was interesting. I was at a talk from a guy called Alex Back, and he's kind of the guru of cow and calf nutrition globally. And he was dismissing colostrum testing, and I'm not dismissing it. I think it's a worthy discussion. He said it's all about managing the cow to make and the heifer to make sure you've quality colostrum. So when we think about that, we think about the transition period of the cow and the heifer, energy and protein going in to create that colostrum, which is higher fat and protein. So knowing what's in our silage, supplementing coming up to calving. I think with heifers as well, don't underestimate the impact of stress and colostrum quality. So we can measure colostrum using the bricks. Sorry, I have a very small picture of the bricks here. People are very familiar with it. What I tend to do is if you want to test every sample, that's fine. What I certainly say is where it's very useful if we're sampling the first batch of heifers coming in, it gives us an indication if they're hitting their markers of over 22, 23%. It's a really good indication. If we're changing pits of silage and we haven't tested it, I would always sample colostrum again just to make sure that protein's not low and we haven't missed something. It's a really nice tool when we're storing colostrum as well. So when we're putting colostrum in the freezer, we're marking those bags. It's a nice thing to put the high quality stuff in there because, we get midway through calving, we tend to have lots of colostrum. Let's keep the good stuff in the freezer for the later season. So I think testing has a place, but really the management of the cow and heifer pre-calving is really important. We know that we want to get the right quantities in there. That's breed specific, so 3 to 4 liters. Calves are most likely to suckle in the first 10, 15, 20 minutes after birth. Their suckle reflex is the strongest. So whether you use tube or bottle is a farm decision. And if you have specific questions, please pop them in the chat. We want to get it in quickly because the gut closes down. And this is important for my next slide that I talk about. You've heard that all before, okay? And I think we've made massive advances in colostrum. We can blood test calves between 5 and 7 days and we can check for passive transfer. The really exciting things, and maybe I'm the only one getting excited about it, but is the next things we're learning about colostrum. Colostrum's got all these bioactives in it. It's got these growth factors and other things that are not just priming the young calf in 24 hours or the first 7 days of life, but are actually influencing lifetime performance. And this is where we see these calves as the next generation of the farm system to, and production and performance. And I think there's some really exciting work in colostrum being done. And interestingly as well, human health companies are buying bovine colostrum because they now recognize some of these ingredients are in there. So colostrum is so, so valuable. So Dennis, before I go on to the next slide, maybe you can give us an indication, anyone who's filled in the poll on kind of numbers, where are people actually at with testing?
So a good response to the poll, Tommy. So 16% of those who responded actually test nearly all the samples, so 80% plus of the samples. 20% test occasionally, and then about two-thirds don't test at all. So,
Okay,
and in
interesting.
fairness, this, like, I suppose this is kind of a new, I suppose it's a new thing people are trying out on farm, isn't it? It's only the last couple of years, really, I think that people are starting to engage, but it's it has its uses, that's for sure.
Yeah, it's become very fashionable, very in vogue, and I think it has a place. And it's, and I'm not if you're not, if you're testing every sample and that's working for you. I think I was challenged by somebody recently on this, that about if we're trying to think about simple systems, well then let's do everything we can to ensure colostrum quality is really good. And then I think it's a very useful tool in heifers, and I suppose for that. And even if you're using it for storage, I think that's just the point. So really interesting, and thanks for everybody for giving their thoughts on that. One thing I will say about colostrum, and it's a very much a practical observation. You've heard a lot on it, on the 1, 2, 3 and the quickly quantity, and that kind of thing. But clean colostrum, okay? So one of the things we look at with colostrum is it's got twice the fat and protein of normal milk. So what colostrum does when it's in a dump bucket or it's in any bucket is it leaves a kind of slimy fatty layer. And that's really important because that slimy fatty layer is called a glycocalyx. It's a kind of a carbohydrate mix that bacteria love, particularly coliforms, and they propagate in that. And one of the real challenges, unfortunately, with that is we have done all the work in colostrum and we're storing it, or the dump bucket doesn't maybe get the same attention. And I'm not doing this from a kind of an idea point of view. I've swabbed dump buckets and I've seen a lot of work done on swabbed dump buckets. They tend to be a thing we forget about. And what happens is if we have a lot of bacteria in colostrum, it actually gets in, and don't worry too much about this picture, but this is inside the gut, the villi. These coliforms can get in ahead of the antibodies and they can disrupt passive transfer. So you've maybe fed the cows, you've done the quickly, you're up in the middle of the night tubing that calf with colostrum. But if you're using colostrum that's been sitting in a bucket or in a constantly not been, out of a dump bucket, that is a risk. And I think it's one area, it's a kind of a tweak, and calf rearing is about tweaking many pieces of the jigsaw, and it's all about relevant use of time. And I think this is one area on farm that we certainly could improve on. Interestingly, as well, I see more farms getting old refrigerators and they're refrigerating colostrum. So instead of keeping it in the bucket for a couple of days, they're putting it into maybe Ziploc bags or containers and refrigerating. You're getting 48 to 72 hours out of it. And in any system, when you're making massive strides and improvements, these are the next little steps to take us to the next level. Okay, so colostrum really foundational. You hear a lot about it. Transition milk is the next thing. So the next 2 to 8 milkings from the cow, it's not like normal milk, and it's not like colostrum. It's got higher fat and protein, which is important nutritionally, but it's also got these bioactives in it. So nature doesn't do things by accident. That's one thing about nature, and it's really beneficial from a energy setting up and priming the gut, but also these bioactives are very important from gut development point of view. It creates huge challenges, I know, on farm, because as numbers get busy, volumes go up, and you have the same challenges around hygiene. And then if you throw Johne's disease, which is a chronic disease, into that mix and the risk of spread, it can be very difficult to manage it. So it's farm by farm. You've got to know your Johne's disease status. But again, observations, research, and I'll talk a bit about it tonight, are good. But I'm always looking to see, I'm looking at calves, and those calves stand out. What are you doing? And I go back through all the bits of the system. And one of the things I think people that are utilizing transition milk are definitely getting the benefits. Again, if you're using scour vaccines, a lot of the antibodies that are produced by the cow, not just in colostrum, it's important, but you have to know your Johne's risk. So it's worth considering. Again, I'll ask the question at the end of it. What are the areas, maybe the tweaks we can make? This is a small study from Canada, but it's really interesting. I like it. They took a group of calves and they put them on colostrum, and I think it was transition milk for 5 to 6 days. And then they took a group of calves on colostrum and put them straight onto milk replacer. So they harvested calves, they post-mortem them, and they compared their digestive tracts. And again, don't worry too much about the detail, but you can see a difference between left and right. So inside in the gut, there's these villi. So the gut's a huge organ, but there's these folds in there to increase the absorptive capacity. And literally the calves that were on the transition milk, their villi were twice the length of those that weren't. And I think this is a study, there's not that much work because obviously harvesting large numbers of calves for these type of studies is difficult. It does indicate that colostrum is, or transition milk, sorry, is there for a very purposeful reason and has a nice role to play in calf health if we can manage it. Okay, feeding calves. The two pillars on calf health is probably colostrum and feeding. I could do 2 hours on feeding calves. I really like nutrition. But couple of key points. Whole milk versus milk replacer. I'm a fan of whole milk. In a poor milk price year, probably more farms will be feeding whole milk, and other farms will, for various reasons, be feeding milk replacer. When we're talking milk replacer, the one thing, it's a very boring message, but quality and consistency. Calves love consistency. So same time, same temperature, and particularly when mixing milk replacer, trying to make that process as simple as we can. Again, I mentioned that early lifetime performance, or the pre-weaning period, influences the mammary gland and future production. Okay, so we're investing a lot in our calves now, but that's going to pay back. So here's all the studies done. Arguably, what I would argue with these studies is they're all in high producing herds indoors. But I do think the rule sings true as well, and I'll talk about it in the next slide, that if we can optimize feeding, we will optimize better performance long term. I think more feeding as well in cold weather. If we've bigger sheds, I do think calves just are more robust. And my big message on feeding has been for the last number of years is, if we go back to the seesaw, making that clear link between feeding and immune function. If you're on sausage rolls and Red Bull for the spring, there's a high likelihood you'll charge on for the first 3 or 4 weeks, but you may get a flu in March. Okay, so it's a very simple principle, but our immune system is very it requires a lot of energy. So if a calf is struggling metabolically, they just don't have that energy and capacity to deliver into immune function. So that's a key link. The other thing about the calf as well, in the first, I suppose, so I advocate for a little bit more milk. That's what I kind of see. That's the trend I see. But for a kilo of dry matter, whether it's powder or milk going into to calves, we're never going to get that kilo in return average daily gain again. One other observation I've made from my travels around, and again, when I see less digestive issues, usually whether it's milk bars or feeding equipment, there's a lot of attention to detail cleaning after every feed. There's big debate on how much cleaning you should do in seasonal systems. It's time is a problem, but definitely it's a trend I see where I see very healthy calves. Cleaning routines are good. And then I suppose when we think about our feeding regime, we've got to think about that in the context of when we're weaning and how we're weaning. And I'll talk about that as well. Calves still need water, of course, and they need a quality concentrate going in. So if we think about more milk, because it's something I do advocate, and here's poll number two. So I'm getting the hang of these polls now with the big red marker reminding me. We're just going to have a look, Dennis. I think you have another poll.
Good man, Tom. You're catching on. You're catching on quick. So this is about the volume of feeding. So Maeve is going to pop it up there. So just two options this time. And really what we're trying to discern here is your level of feeding. So less than 6 liters a day or more than 6 liters a day. So if you're less, click that. And if you're six or more, click that. We'll just get an idea about how much people are feeding their calves.
And
So
that
again,
kind of
Tommy,
that
we'll come back.
7 days to 21 day mark, when we're getting calves up, what kind of feeding level are we on farm?
Exactly when they're up and running. Yep. So drive on,
Okay.
Tom, sure, and we'll,
Yeah,
we'll come back to it.
I'll drive on. So we'll go back to the end of this slide. So again, we fundamentally think about a calf. It's a monogastric. It's developing into ruminant for the first 3 or 4 weeks, totally dependent on milk for its energy. And that milk is doing so many functions. It's got energy for maintenance. It's got growth, which we want as well, and it's feeding into its future performance as well. So this early life programming. So the science is started saying that we should be feeding more milk. I think practically on farms where they're upping milk, I think they're seeing better results. Now, when we look at milk replacers, we've got to think about what is in whole milk and what do we want from a milk replacer. Again, you could do a webinar on this, but ultimately, it's not proteins we're really thinking about. It's actually amino acids. So animal proteins, these are the building blocks for growth, cellular function, organs, immune function. So we want the quality protein going into that milk replacer. People talk about skim versus whey. I can talk about that if you have questions about it after. Both have plus and minuses. Fat percentage. I think fat percentage is probably you want to hit it around 18 or 20%, but if you have a smaller Jersey cross calf, it becomes relative because it's a good energy source as well. When it comes to quality milk replacer, it's getting harder to read the label, but back to if you're getting a very cheap milk replacer, maybe you're getting a great deal, but quality milk replacer is worth every single penny of it if it's doing the right job. And again, when it comes to feeding, I'm a fan of more milk. So what am I saying when it's more milk? I see all sorts of trends. I see people pushing people calves up to between 6 and 8 liters at that kind of peak. I see people going more for ad lib feeding now, and that does impact when we can wean. If you're going for once a day, if you have a different system and if it's working fine. But certainly the trend I see on farm, the research trend has been strong on this for the last 10 years, is more milk to calves. It does impact weaning, but I think the science and what I see practically on farm makes sense. Now, if we are going to give calves more milk, we've probably got to start early, and that's stomach or abomasum. We can't just jump up at 2 weeks. It's got to adapt to it. So those feeding programs or those feeding curves, we want to be getting up to 6 liters early. People have lots of probably questions on it, but that's a trend I'm seeing. So my key message is link milk feeding to immunity. If you really want to look ahead, link it to future performance, and then look at the trends on more milk feeding and see where that fits in your farm. But of course, if it's not broken, don't fix it. Okay, Dennis, just before we go on to automatic calf feeders, you might tell us the results of the poll.
So what do you think, Tom? How would your
My estimate would be that 80% of people are feeding about 6 liters and probably 20% are a little bit more.
so 62% are feeding 6 or more liters, 38% less than 6 liters. So about two
Okay.
thirds are feeding the six or more.
Okay, so yeah, I would imagine a lot of people are at that 6 liter maybe mark. So maybe more detail in the questions when I come up with them next time. But again, it does indicate we're moving up to where calves need to be at that 6 liter minimum, 3 liters twice a day. And again, if your system is working for you, that's okay. A very an observation I made for a long time. So when the diseases come, like the cryptos and the digestive upsets. when calves are on that lower plane of nutrition, it hits them way, way harder. And there's always a reservation as well. If I give calves more milk, they're going to make them scour. That's, to me, is a myth. I think I haven't seen it practically. So I know it's a big change of mindset, but the trend is towards more milk. And I always look at trends. And I think in 10 years' time, we'll probably be rearing calves. You can ask me that question after. It's a good question, I think, where we'll be around calf rearing. Automatic calf feeders. This is an undeniable trend that more and more farmers are putting them in. I personally quite like them. I know people have put them in and taken them out, but the majority of farmers who put them in see them as a huge labour saving tool. Calves do well on them. And just a couple of things. Every calf is coming, in a batch is coming to one point. So it becomes that infection pressure piece is a bit higher. So hygiene is key around the machine. The teat as well. Really important that the teat is correct. It's the correct diameter. It needs to be changed regularly. And as well, water going into these machines needs to be checked. I have a slide on water. Good detergent as well. But these machines, I think, work well. Getting the correct milk replacer choice in them. And obviously, I've done a lot of work with my role in precision microbes of feeding that additive through it, and it has a role to play as well as a tool. But automatic calf feeders, they're getting better. I'm a fan of them. Again, the feeding curve in the program is important. Knowing, every year, I think they need to be serviced in advance of calving. I think that's a standard. Knowing the basics of the routine yourself, going through it. The detergent choice as well, I think, is important. I think it's something that's overlooked because they're not under the same pressure as maybe your milking machine cycle. So the correct detergent is important. Now, I'm going to slip back into a small bit of psychology here again because there is methods to the madness that ultimately, when we think about the outcome versus the process, and we're at the start of a new year, and aside from farming, it's like I'm like everybody else. I'm starting a healthy new me, and I was reminded. I always try and think about something different ideas when I do a presentation. I was reminded of a conversation I had many years ago with my local GP, who made me think as a vet. He said to me, if I could get people to drink 2 liters of water and walk a mile a day, I'd cut my caseload in half. Maybe an oversimplification, but it made me think about what are the simple behaviours that really drive calf health and performance. And that's where I've come up with the concept of being brilliant with the basics. Also, as a Kerry man, you cannot but have David Clifford in there in a picture of sports people. But if what I love looking at is different systems outside of farming and seeing if we're trying to get an outcome or trying to improve things, what do we have to do? And whether it's Johnny Sexton or Michael Jordan, so some of the best athletes in the world, best performers in the world, they've started from a base below or around everyone else, and it's these slow methodical changes over time, and that's why I talk about people and and routines as such an important part of it. And I keep harping on about these small changes over time. Keep focusing in on the simple things. Great documentary. I know Michael Jordan has probably never made a farming webinar before, but great documentary on his life story. And he talks about, all the things, the shots he didn't get, the games he didn't win. So in all of our systems, there's things that go wrong. We make mistakes, but it's about that slow adaptation into the system and making it better. And for the purposes of this, if you look at two identical farms, same numbers, same infrastructure. If we take different approaches to calf health, and this is probably after, like, when I read papers, I'm on webinars, I love calf health. And I'm going to tell you my basic message on calf health that I've learned after all the years. But let's look at two different farms. One farm focused on dry cow diet, energy, focused on energy and protein pre-calving, know what's in the silage, prepped pens and equipment. Milk cows, bottle feed colostrum, tube when needed, colostrum handling plan, probably utilising transition milk, feeding 6 to 8 litres by the first week of life, deep beds of straw, strict hygiene in all feeding equipment. And then I look at a farm, maybe same numbers, same infrastructure, silage looks good, I'm on a well-deserved break, cows start calving, we start work. Some calves suckle, some bottle, where's the stomach tube? Waste milk, transition milk, it's headaches. We have always fed 5 litres of milk. Straw is expensive. It's cold enough. Colostrum will be all right in that bucket for another day. I haven't time to be doing all this extra work and preparation that Tommy's talking about. And ultimately, it comes back to people. But there's two very different outcomes here because it is ultimately about that attention to detail and consistency. And it really is a key driver of calf health that we do the simple things well consistently. And I suppose neither of these two farms have time for, well, farm on the right doesn't have time for prevention, but nobody has time for sick calves. So this is where, and I'll talk about the last slide, where it's an opportunity to little think about the system. Where are the tweaks we can make ahead of calving that may make a difference? No perfect farms, but small tweaks. And if you keep applying that, whether it's sport or anything we do, gradual improvement. Okay, so the next bit of pontificating is over. The next pillar is hygiene. So hygiene is obviously the reduction of infection pressure, and I'll talk about it in the next slide. Now, couple of simple things I want to always kind of get across to people is when we think about cleaning calf equipment, there's a difference between a detergent and a disinfectant. So people will know I haven't done any work with Fairy Liquid. I am open if they're interested, but Fairy Liquid is a detergent, a really effective detergent. It gets rid of that biofilm slime. But something like Milton, a disinfectant, is different. It kills. And when we're dealing with milk, transition milk and colostrum, we do need to use detergents more for more thorough cleaning. There's all different routines on washing and cleaning and cycles and that we can talk about it, top tips on what you should be doing. But feeding equipment, if you're not cleaning your feeding equipment, just take the teats off and look at that grime and slime. That's where the bacteria propagate. That's where we get a lot of maybe our digestive upsets that they don't ping up on the scour test kits that they're rota or corona, but these are these bacterial overgrowths we need to look at. So detergents and disinfectants. Hygiene is about reducing infection pressure, but it has to be simple. Again, if we think about the disinfectants we're using ahead of calving, something like crypto or coccidiosis, they're a bit like Enoch Burke. They just keep appearing year on year. But ultimately, when we think about hygiene, we're trying to reduce down the challenge. So what disinfectant do I need to use on my farm? But ultimately, for me, hygiene is a routine, but it has to work. One that works and you can repeat on farm. And it starts in the calving pen. And if we think about the calving pen in busy seasonal systems, that's tricky. Easy farm with a PowerPoint. This slide is not at an angle for a reason. Drainage in calving pens is never as good as, in my opinion, as I see it in calf pens. And we want to try and remove moisture. Moisture is the enemy. So, the clean straw pen, but drainage is really important. Regularly cleaning out calving pens. All in, all out systems. Farms are very comfortable with that now. We're putting calves into pens, we're filling them. If we're removing them from that pen, we're cleaning the pen in between. Stomach tubes. So the stomach tube, some farms will stomach tube lots, if not all, most calves. Certainly don't want to be using the sick calf stomach tube as your colostrum tube. That's a basic. But if you're doing a lot of stomach tubing, having multiple tubes and having a fairly thorough regime, and that's where the Fairy Liquid comes in. And again, it's not everyone's cup of tea, but I'm going on to farms and they have those little wiry devices for cleaning the inside of the tube. You might say that's excessive, but I think it's that attention to detail. That's what I love myself watching. Um, Again, feeders as well, feeding equipment. Of course, there is the challenge when we're cleaning equipment, and you must remember this: moisture is the enemy. If you're feeding equipment regularly, take it outside the shed where possible. We don't want to add moisture into sheds. Okay, so hygiene is one that works for you, something that's simple, repeatable. You have hot water, you have brushes, you have your disinfectants. It's easy to do. It is going to be a chore, but I think it's the short-term pain of a job like that to save that long-term pain of really sick calves and disease spread. And different farms, and I probably wouldn't get an A plus in calf rearing because attention to detail is probably not my greatest skill set, but it's something I observe where calf health has done well. Okay, so if we think about the environment, so we kind of talked about the calf, the immune system, feeding, etc. So the environment of the calf, and in seasonal systems, I don't think I've seen some really good calf sheds. I've seen really excellent calf sheds in my travels, um, but I don't think I've ever seen a perfect one because when you have a seasonal system and you have a February day and a March day and an April's morning that are so variable, and you've calves that start at 40 kilos and they finish as ruminants and their critical temperature changes. It is so hard to get the perfect shade. But one thing we do know is that fresh air is very effective at doing a couple of things. It keeps the bed dry, moisture is the enemy. It's actually really good. It's got a natural disinfectant in it called ozone at killing pathogens. So we want to maximize fresh air at calf level. A calf spends 80% of its day lying down. So we're going to get calf airflow at that level of the calf. So but then we have the whole challenge of drafts, and this is the real challenge. And then we think about, well, we've all been traditionally taught about calf or of housing. We think about Well, a ruminant animal creates heat that's stacked, that heat rises and it draws cold air in. But that doesn't apply to calves, certainly in the first 3 to 4 weeks. So, what do I think is working? What do I think is working? I think it's very hard to say, but I would say I'm a fan of fresh air. I find sheds that are more open with good natural ventilation, position the shed correct is important. Where calves are on a higher plane of feeding, I'm just trying to get any way I can to get more milk into calves. When they're on a higher plane of feeding, plus or minus jackets, lots of straw. That shed is pretty robust in February, and it's a lot easier to manage it as well in March or April. For some sheds, it involves tinkering around with maybe side sheeting, etc., and putting in tubes. I'm going to talk about them next. But getting fresh air is right, but it's a real challenge. Every farm is different. So when we go into the shed and drainage, I think we underestimate drainage. The 1 in 20 slope, but not just that, the drains are actually functioning, getting moisture out of the farm. Okay, we go into the shed. Every shed is different because of the geography. It could be on a hill, it could be in a hollow. We never like to waste a wall, it could be beside another shed. So every shed is different. The weather changes. So if we're getting problems with pneumonia year in, year out, that's an issue. You've got to look at fresh air, not just vaccination. You've got to look at the whole thing. What are the calves telling us? Are they huddled? Or is their hair sticking up on the back of their backs? The calves will tell you a little bit in about it. Get in for a feel and a smell of the calves and the environment. Like sheds will tell us a lot, calves will tell us a lot. Very interesting. We look at these tubes. So this is I was on a farm just before Christmas and they did this little gadget, and I won't win awards for photography, but it's a pneumometer. It's basically measuring the air quality in real time and producing this lovely data. Okay, and it's really interesting. I walked into the shed cold. I think it was early December, so it's cold, but the humidity is really high, still day. And this machine is telling us all this beautiful, and they put in this lovely fan. So I, of course, went in, and I really like this as well. I like these when you if you can put straw bales in during cold times. It's a nice way calves huddle around it. But I went into the shed, and I left. No, I went back into the shed. So I looked and I looked at the data and I said, right, looked at the calves. And I just stood here and I looked at the tube. And the tube, one of the challenges with some of these tubes is they pre-drilled holes. So those holes were pushing the air out here. There was no circulation of down at this pneumometer or where the calves were. So we want to get fresh air down at calf level. So this tube, because there's pre-drilled holes in it from manufacturing, had to come down and out. And I think I really like those tubes that actually are actually designed with the shed in mind. So they're based in the dimensions of the shed because we want to get air change down at calf level. The challenge with these tubes is as well is that if they don't have variable speeds, in a cold day they can make calves very cold. So you can offset it with more straw, more milk, or jackets. But I like the ones, I think we're getting better at this technology with the variable speed, but they have to push air in where it's supposed to go. So when we think about sheds, where do I think it's going? I think, look, a lot of the new design sheds, they work very, very effectively, but every shed is a little bit different. Let the calves and the disease history tell you the story. If you're consistently getting pneumonia, you've got to look at ventilation as part of that exam. Okay, calf comfort. I spent a lot of time in doing cow signals. I'm very fond of it, and I am an advocate for thinking about what the calf or cow wants. As production performance medicine, it makes sense. They'll give you more back, and it's good for the calf, it's good for the farmer. And that 3 to 4 weeks, the calf is a monogastric. So what does that mean? Well, the temperature for one thing, cold is a huge issue for calves because under 15 degrees, calves have to start work to stay hot. And we think about milk energy going in. It's for maintenance, metabolism. We want it for growth. We also want it for immunity. And it's a bit like when a calf becomes cold, it's like your phone on low battery mode. A lot of the other stuff switches off and you can maybe make a call. It's about. So the calf is a little similar to that. We need to think about, right, cold is a challenge. How do we mitigate it? Straw is fantastic. More milk is fantastic. And this is where calf jackets come in. But it is, and I know this is a challenge on farms, it's so hard to get it right. But ultimately, if we think about even during cold snaps of weather, if it's going to get particularly cold, can we increase milk volume slightly? Is that something we can adapt? Not massive changes. Put in a little bit more straw. Can we put in the round bales or the square bales, the ones we have spare, so calves can nestle in around them where possible? Because cold depresses that immunity. So I would really think that's important. The other thing I'd say about calf comfort is pain limits performance. So dehorning is a stressful event. It makes sense that we give a local anesthetic and a painkiller to a calf. A lot of farms now are getting their vets in, they're sedating the calves, they're giving them the painkiller local anesthetic. And what's really interesting about the feed intakes of those calves on automatic feeders is because of the trial work I do with precision, I'm kind of exposed to a lot of other data. And we were doing a trial recently in a very large farm in the UK, and we had a lot of automatic feed calf feeder data. And I was looking at my own data, but I was also looking at the behavior of the calves and the different management practices around this farm. So I do think we've got to just think about that and don't stack up these stressors. Don't dehorn on a day when it's going to get cold or the weather's going to change. Again, maybe it's small details, but it makes a difference. Okay, another really fundamental thing for the calf piece is more space, more straw. Very, very simple. Straw solves a lot of problems. Again, I think if you're building a calf shed, aim for that 2.5 meters square. The calf starts at 40 kilos. Ultimately, at weaning, they're 80, 90 kilos. We've got to think about space as well. It's a huge driver for disease in group housing. I'm going to cost you a fortune, more colostrum, more milk, more space, more straw, more air, and more hygiene. But it definitely, for me, space is a huge limiting factor. Again, if you're caught for space, if it's a TB outbreak or, things have gone against you, is there some sort of an overflow shed you can use to temporarily rear some calves, taking pressure off? Because don't underestimate calves in a tight space. Disease loves it. And water quality as well. It's a simple one. I'll keep it simple. I started testing water on farms a couple of years ago. I saw pig vets at it and I said, this is interesting. I wonder, do we need to check water? My observation was that particularly where you've got a header tank sitting in a calf shed, in a seasonal system, and especially if you've got an automatic calf feeder, that header tank is active for 4 to 5 months of the year and it sits dormant. And sometimes we never look into it and it gets the build-up of biofilm and bugs. And those bugs can have a big impact, particularly with automatic calf feeders. Simple thing you can do, lift up, don't climb up and fall on my behalf, but look into that header tank. Is there a greeny slime in it? You can take a sample from it and bring it to the local council to just check for TBCs. Um, or clean it out every year as part of the routine that we don't have that source. Water, it's not fundamental it's not a huge factor in disease. It's really important from the calf from a functioning point of view because we're trying to develop a rumen that they have water as well as milk from the early doors. But water quality is something as well. Okay, I'm nearly at the end of my tips on calves. Just I suppose stress is very basic. What does stress do? It depresses immune function. It's a big impact on gut health. Most of my research work and most of my daily life is in gut health at the moment, and it has a massive impact on gut health in both calves and humans. Big area of research in animals and humans is the impact of stress on gut. Now, there's lots of stressors. Some of them are far, far out of our control. For example, the weather, but the ones we can control on farm, if we reduce them, we can have a big impact on calf health. It would be remiss of me not to mention a little bit of the work I'm doing at the moment, all in gut health, and this is a really interesting emerging space. I won't spend too long on it, but in the young calf, in ourselves, in every animal, we've got these microbes in the gut, the good bugs to simplify them, and they start from a young age being very, very important to digestion. And digestion leads to average daily gain. So we talk a lot about quality of milk replacer going in, but they has to be digested. We know that 70% of the immune system's in the gut. That's because of the size of the gut and it's open. It's actually, if you think about the gut, it's the first area where animals are exposed to food because it's going in there. So that's why so much of the immune function is there. And the gut microbiome is really key to overall health. So Precision Microbes, it's a small Irish success story as well. We manufacture in Dublin. It's a supplement that can be given daily in milk, and it's a tool. And since from the very beginning, I've talked a lot about calf health. It's a tool in calf rearing. It's the best tool I've seen on farm, but I'm of course biased. Fed daily in milk. Again, it's unique, it's a liquid, but you can talk to your own vet about it. We're quite proud in this, and I might get in trouble for talking too much, but we got our first published trial, and again, it showed really interesting in a 1,000 cow herd in Scotland. Really interesting trial. It's on our website, again, showing the impact of probiotics on calves from a digestive perspective, helping them recover. The farmers really challenged with crypto. A really nice trial, and I'm kind of proud of that, so had to mention it. Okay, so if we think about other things we're going to give calves or tools we're going to use, key things we think about are probably vaccinations. And again, I think everybody would love just a vaccine plan. Give me a vaccine plan and I can just implement it. Unfortunately, every farm is slightly different. What are the challenges you're facing? And if it's pneumonia, vaccines will help, but without really assessing the environment, the two need to work together. Pieces of a jigsaw. And again, looking at scour vaccines, looking at all the different things. What are the vaccines essentially trying to do? They're trying to stimulate the immune system to create these antibodies. So they're on the seesaw, they're trying to support immune function. I think pneumonia vaccines work well. There's different protocols for different farms. I don't work with vaccines or sort of, I'm in not in that space, but I'm always looking at on farms at vaccine storage and administration. And people talk about the price of vaccines within the system and price per calf from a rearing perspective. But again and again, vaccines are useful tools, but storage and administration, they're cold chain, they're specific medicines, they need to be kept correctly. And time again, they are not. And we're trying to get this vaccine to do something. It's a very specific medicine that needs to be given at the right amount, at the right time to get the results we want. So it's a boring old message, but if we're going to pay for vaccines, use them and store them correctly. Again, from a mineral perspective on calves, I think when we think about dry cow minerals and managing the cow, that's part of the calf mineral story. I think that, whether we're feeding whole milk or milk replacer, most of those will have your macro and micro minerals. It becomes much more important when we go maybe to a grazing perspective where they can have an influence on calf health. Again, these are tools that I layer on top of the six or seven things I talked about at the start. Okay, Dennis, our last poll, and we're nearly there in relation to calf health, and we'll take some questions. I want to talk a little bit about weaning, and this is a whole subject on its own, but you have another poll.
Yeah, Tommy. So this is maybe with the future in mind a little. So post weaning, are your calves performing to your expectations post weaning? So this we won't be going delving into this tonight, but it's just something we were myself and Tommy were chatting about earlier on. That there seems to be a good lot of issues post weaning, summer scour and those type of things. So again, yes or no, are you happy? Are your calves performing to your expectations post weaning?
Brilliant. Okay, while you're taking in that poll information, I'm just going to say a few words on weaning because primarily we're looking at the first 6 weeks with a lot of what I've talked about. But a couple of key things on weaning. My opinion is, yeah, we're struggling. We're actually doing a lot better. Every year we're making the improvements in the pre-weaning period. We're getting better and better at calf rearing. People are, making adaptations, etc. It seems to be this tweak at weaning time and post-weaning, and that's not just even a turnout and grazing. And even if we look at weaning outdoors, if we have milk bars outdoors and we're weaning calves at grass, typically in nursing pens or nursing fields, there is challenges, right? So a couple of tips on weaning for the year ahead. The research is very, very clear on this now. Slow and steady. Okay, so when we look at weaning strategies, we've got to look at bringing down, and this entails probably longer weaning time. Now, if you can, once a day feeding and you can get weaning early, fine, okay. But what I'm seeing on farm is that we're probably going to need to look at our weaning strategies. Certainly, the time of weaning. You can ask me the question, what do I see in 10 years? But over 2 to 3 weeks, dropping down milk. Okay, we need concentrates in there that are small amounts palatable for the very beginning, and the calf just gets to a point where they really start developing. The other target that I don't like is that kilo concentrates per calf per day as a kind of metric. When you look at the data, some calves are only picking 100 grams, some are eating 3 or 4 kilos. I think that 2 kilo mark at weaning, kind of at a group level, kind of will ensure that you have a strong functioning rumen. Now, the challenges we see post weaning at grass, they're multiple, but I think part of some of the issues we're seeing is that if we can do part of the thing, which is having a fully robust rumen developed by weaning time and with the right amount of concentrates, the right amount of forage going in. One of our real challenges, we need more research on this, is we are taking the data from indoor systems, which are typically weaning calves on high concentrates, whatever feed we're using, but they're using a lot of times straw, which is not a forage, as the kind of rumen developer. We're adapting the rumen to to graze forages, which is grasses. So controversial, but do we need to be looking at hays and haylages as part of that system? Because they are forages. That's just something that we need to think about. But that period, Dennis, would be a great one to go back to, but slow and steady. Okay, and especially if you're feeding that little bit more milk, you have to be more conscious that you're going to wean a little bit later. But I think that in the long term, it's better for the calf. Two last slides, very quickly. Again, we're going to get to calves and seasonal systems. So having a plan. Again, early intervention. So early intervention is key because the longer disease manifests in the animal, the more critical damage it does to functioning tissue. Very important with the lungs. The lungs don't repair. We have a little bit more leeway with the gut potentially, but ultimately you don't want that calf to get a setback. So very, stockmanship. And as farms get bigger and we have people coming in maybe to rear calves, maybe feeding calves in the morning, have you done a little bit of training? Have they looked at healthy calves so they can spot the sick calf and get in quickly? Have you a plan with your own vet around the first aid treatments, the metacams or whatever it might be, the fluid therapy? I've been involved in developing fluid hydrotherapy or hydro or electrolyte solutions myself, so I know quite a bit about the whole fluid thing now and the dynamics of it. Having a good electrolyte functioning there, these are all kind of key parts. We still get sick calves. Key message: early intervention and have a plan. So last slide, Dennis, and we'll take some questions. So look, everything we do, you have to evaluate yourself. Here's my equation. Effort, consistency multiplied by time. What's the reward? But farms are changing all the time. Sometimes the one person farms, often more and more it's teams of people. And even in farms where one person is, they may have someone coming in helping them with calf rearing during a busy period of time. And I'm amazed, and this trend has got really in vogue in the UK, and I spent a lot of time over there, of calf rearers coming into farm. They might have a few hours in the morning or a few hours in the evening spare. They love rearing calves. They might have no background, but the right person with the calf and the calf system, that attention to detail, the success is brilliant. A plan and a place for everything. So you've a choice between farm A and farm B, and what you want to do. Again, very important rule, and sorry to keep going on about, but progress over perfection. Don't beat yourself up. You're doing, like calf rearing is difficult. A lot of things we're doing are really good, but what are the small tweaks we can make? And is this an opportunity? Maybe you want to watch Netflix, you want to go on holidays, you're going skiing, or you're going to the pub. But if you have time, write down with a pen and paper. Very powerful little thing. What's working on my calf rearing system? What am I proud of? What's not working? Am I getting pneumonia every year? Am I getting scour? And what are the simple changes I can make this year? Could apply to anything. And it's a little exercise that's quite powerful. And what are the questions? And again, looking and talking to experts, your advisors, your vets and people out there, Munster Herd Health Team, there's lots of people out there with expertise in this space. So it's about setting up your system that's going to work for you and deliver results. Colostrum hygiene, transition milk feeding, hygiene straw, the environment the calf is in. Someone asked me once, how much straw should I put in the pen? I said to them, if the Farmer's Journal were coming with their photographer in the morning to take a picture of your calves in the pen, how much straw would you have in there? Do that every day. The environment, calf comfort. Again, I'm looking forward to a few questions. I probably went on a little bit longer. I'm going to blame the polls, but everybody blames the polls. I'm a real politician. But thank you very much again for everybody for listening in. And thanks, Munster Bovine. So hopefully there'll be a few questions.
Absolutely super, Tommy. There's more than a few questions. So we have a great crowd on. There was over 160 on and still on. So we have a pile of questions. There's I'd say 20 or so questions. So I think we're gonna start chronologically. The first man came in at 8:05 with his questions, so we're just gonna go down through them all. So if you did ask a question, we will get to it. We won't leave any question unanswered. So we'll power on. So the first question came in at 8:05. Please comment on the increasing prevalence of mycoplasma and best route of treatment prevention. Is vaccination the only option?
Great question, and it's a really astute observation. A big problem, mycoplasma. So I visit a lot of farms, and Ireland, UK, and further afield, and you hear this coughing in calves at between 8 and 12 weeks. Calves are fairly healthy, so I suppose mycoplasma is different to every other bacteria and virus because it's got no cell wall. Okay, it comes in through the tonsils. It can be involved in eardrop. It can be involved in pneumonia, joint, can even cause meningitis. We're definitely seeing more of it. And look, as farm numbers go up and calves go up, these diseases and pathogens come along. How do we respond to it? My experience is you've bit boring. The basics have to be done well. It's a very challenging disease. Other respiratory vaccinations have to be in check as well. The problem with respiratory mycoplasma vaccines that I currently see, and the makers of them can give me a different answer, is that you get a really good result from the mycoplasma vaccine year one, maybe year two. But just like its ability to adapt to the effectiveness of antibiotics, it seems to be able to adapt its to the immune response of vaccines. That's very much from what I've seen from the current autogenous vaccines and the ones that were licensed. Now, I know there's a new vaccine for mycoplasma again. Um, it is a really tricky disease. I don't doubt it. The farms that are managing it, that I've seen managing it well, they still have it, and they'll still have that bit of an irritating cough at 8 to 10 weeks, but they've massively reduced down their infection pressure. One tip I'll give people, if you're using milk bars, because it's spread by into the tonsils, if you have young calves and you are using one milk bar per pin for the feeding, go out and spend a few bob on an extra milk bar, a milk bar per pen. You reduce the risk of spread of mycoplasma because it actually gets in through the tonsils in the mouth. That's a tip. Certainly you'll get a good hit off the mycoplasma the first year vaccine. But it's really a tricky disease that the basics have to be right. Again, one of the reasons I think about more feeding is a more robust immune system seems to, okay, you might have that irritating cough at 8 to 10 weeks, but the calves are still strong and thriving. So that would be my very long answer to a tricky question.
Very good.
Definitely prevalence increasing a bit as well.
Yeah, we see in the bulk milk screening, about half the herds were testing, about half of the 3,000 herds would be testing positive for mycoplasma. So,
Look, and Dennis, you're involved in herd health as well at a very high level. If you have anything to add that I haven't covered, please do.
yeah, and I suppose the other, maybe another point is that it comes from the adults and it often comes through milk. So you made a lot of very good points about transition milk. But I suppose the one downside is that, like Iona is, the mycoplasma can be the root. And I would say one thing about the transition milk is what's a big no-no is waste milk. So milk from treated cows is just a no-no to be feeding to calves. And even the bull calves, because if they get it, it'll take off then as well, you know. So
And that's a brilliant point because it's the mastitic milk that's going in. I think that's a really important point.
yeah, and
Brilliant.
that's the most likely place for the mycoplasma to come from, I think, is that the milk from treated cows or the non-saleable whole milk, kind of dumping it into calves. It's not a good practice, especially for mycoplasma. Now, is there any negative, Tom, to feeding too much colostrum?
Um, yeah, so calves, it's very interesting when you look at the data on calves. Some calves can drink 5 or 6 liters of colostrum in one feed. Some calves, 3 liters, they're full. The abomasum can take about 6 liters, right? So if a calf is drinking 4 liters and still guzzling and will go to five, that's the capacity of that calf. Nature doesn't do things by accident. Where it gets interesting with colostrum is if, particularly in seasonal systems, if you can, and again, people are increasingly putting fridges on farm where they're storing spare colostrum. Um, you can give a second feed of colostrum. Easier to do when a calf probably has suckled over bottle over tubing. Tubing they tend to suckle tend to be slow. So I would when I'm looking at tubing calves, I'd set it at a limit based on the breed. So if I have small crossbred calves, 3 liters a lot by tube, 4 liters for a big Holstein Friesian, depends on the breed, is maybe a target you might give your tubing. And then I'd let the calf do a lot of the telling on how much colostrum they'll drink. I'd aim to get 3 or 4 liters in. Remember, when the calf comes out, its suckle reflex is at its strongest. Now, if it's 4 o'clock in the morning, you've got to get sleep, prioritize sleep, come up with a system that works. But where you are bottling calves, get in early and it definitely works well.
So yeah, on that point, the next question, which is better, tube feeding or bottle feeding of colostrum? So you've kind of answered it, Tom, but
Yeah, so this one has come up, and I was called up on this recently, and I love being called up. The research I thought was kind of similar from immunoglobulin absorption, but it's not. Bottling is far better, and I've noticed people going back to bottling calves. Now, tubing is a time thing, function thing, it works fine, but the calf that bottles gets more absorption of antibodies. The study's shown that. Second thing is the calf that bottle feeds is more likely to suckle the second feed, and I think that second feed is still very important. Okay, but it's a function of time and what you want to do. If you're tubing every calf, just make sure you keep the tube clean, it's not damaged, and everyone's trained on the tube and it works okay. But the research would say, and again, trends on farm, amount of farms I've seen who've gone recently in the last 2 or 3 years from tubing to bottling is increasing on their own natural instincts of the second feed.
Yeah, I think you're right there. If you can, they just drink like hell if you can get in there. If you can get in there quick, and while you might save time the first time tubing, the second feed you'll often make up that time because they'll drink easier the second feed. I don't know, something I do with those little teats. The teats can often be quite tight, so a Stanley blade, and just open the openings a little bit to allow it to flow quicker, and they'll guzzle away quicker. So it might just help people feeding colostrum.
Don't
Um,
cut the hand off yourself.
uh,
Don't cut the hand off yourself.
I know, you know, if you're that. Now, what's your view on rotavirus and crypto vaccines in relation to timing of vaccination? Manufacturer's instructions said 3 to 12 weeks pre-calving, but is 12 weeks too long? And would the antibodies have worn off in the cow at 12 weeks?
It's question is asked a lot. Start with rotavirus. We're familiar with rotavirus vaccines. Vaccines are made under very strict circumstances, and in fairness to them, the protocols are really strictly thought about before they're applied. So, in theory, I would say 12 weeks, 3 weeks set on the label. It shouldn't. It should stimulate the immune system, and you should get the antibody response. Beyond that, possibly they're not going to stand over it. What would I say? I think they have a huge role to play. The crypto vaccines new. My experience, I've read the research. I'm obviously biased because I'm in the biological space. I'm still a believer in vaccinations. I've been observing the crypto vaccine very carefully in both the UK, Europe, and Ireland, and I think it'll have a place to play in farms that are challenged with crypto. I think it may be one of these vaccines that'll be interesting, and this is only a theory that over time you might actually see as you increase the use it benefits. It's not a silver bullet. I think when it comes to spread out seasonal calving systems, you may need to go in with a second, not a second shot, but split your rotavirus vaccine into late and early calvers potentially. There's lots of people double vaccinating cows, double using. There's all sorts of things. It's That's a little bit of whataboutery. There could be something to it. One thing I have observed again on farm, and we've seen it in foals in Kentucky with rotavirus, like every virus, it can mutate a little bit, and it can come again in seasons, and we don't have every strain of rotavirus in the vaccine. So it's an ever moving feast. I think if I was using vaccines and I had later calvers, I might split them in two. But I'd be interested to hear your opinion on that as well, Dennis.
No, I'd agree with you. I think it depends on your calving pattern. Um, and certainly, I suppose what some people do, and you hear quite often as well, is they don't bother with the first half of the cows to calve and they vaccinate the later ones because that's when the trouble comes. So I would definitely try and not go down that route to vaccinate early, vaccinate everything, and at least you're preventing from the start because the later calves can often suffer from the build-up that comes earlier. The milk replacer then, Tom, 23% or 25%, and why?
Yeah, so if we look at the protein concentration of whole milk, let's start with whole milk and work backwards. You're at about 25% of solids, okay? But they are amino acids. So I can look at a 23%, and it's a hard answer, 23% milk replacer or 25% milk replacer. And actually, if you look at the quality of proteins in the 23%, it's actually better than the 25%. So I think you need to be above 22% protein, okay? You will get a little bit more value from if it's like for like, same for same, whey versus skim, all those sort of things, very similar. You'll get like for like if you increase percentage. But what we don't do is analyze the quality of those proteins enough. Okay, if you've got a 23% high quality milk replacer, that may deliver for you. 25, I think you get past 26, you're into you don't need that level of protein. But yeah, 25 in theory would be. But my caveat and warning is that it's getting harder to read the labels. The quality of that protein really, really matters.
I suppose this is a question further on down now, but we might take it now, Tommy. Skim versus whey.
Okay, skim versus whey. Sometimes I make these up. Skim clats in the stomach. Whey doesn't clot essentially. So they're different formats. Okay, they both have their advantages. What I would say about skim milk replacers in a seasonal calving system, again, just an observation. Every milk replacer company will have their own say on this. Skim is probably more forgiving for calves where I'm feeding a little bit less milk or I'm going for a more abrupt weaning. Calves are less hungry. Where you have ways, I think again, it's just an observation. I could be wrong. They seem to do well in automatic feeders. I could be wrong. I don't know. Again, probably no massive difference if you get quality right. These are kind of the finer details of it. When you're using ways, you probably need to be a little bit careful about your transitioning and make sure it's correct because calves can get hungrier with them. just an observation. I think fundamentally, I don't get into skim or whey categories once quality is right. What I see as a much bigger issue is consistency on feeding time. So if I'm deciding to feed 150 grams or 125 grams per liter, whatever it is, that I'm doing that at the kind of same temperature, you would be surprised the impact of that. And again, see lots of issues going wrong and talk to lots of people. And actually, at the base of some of these things is just that, half a bucket goes in one day, three quarters of a bucket. That inconsistency in feeding is probably as important as skim versus whey. I think they both have a place in their systems. I was leaning towards skim, but in fairness, there's some really good quality whey replacers out there as well.
Excellent.
I have
Uh,
my favorites. Email for more information. I'm not going to be name dropping milk replacers.
a hygiene question then, Tom. Is a once a day hot rinse often enough to sterilize a single unit plant for colostrum harvesting in a calving shed? So I suppose the bucket plant that's in the calving shed for just for milking for
Okay.
harvesting colostrum.
When I did a bit of work with an expert in this space, and again it has a little machine luminometer for measuring it, so it takes the guesswork out of it. It's amazing when you go onto farm and you look at the swabs of these buckets, and the TBCs are so high. Um, the dump bucket should get the same wash routine as the milking machine because it's actually got twice the risk. Because if you've got twice the fat and protein, essentially you've got twice the risk of that slime on it. I would say once a day is not enough, but if it's working for you, it's all you all work, always work back from if you're getting issues. If you're not getting issues, if something's working. If you are getting issues, is that the tweak you need to make? From my experience on farm, the dump bucket is not looked at enough. When we look at a hot wash, sometimes when we think about colostrum, are you better putting very hot water on it or cold water? Cold water is actually better at actually getting rid of biofilament slime. And then I would put a cold wash maybe in the morning and maybe focus on a cold wash with detergent even, and then maybe a disinfectant. So it has to be a simple process. But the issue is, and like it's easy farm on a PowerPoint, colostrum leaves a slime and the dump bucket often gets overlooked.
Very good. How many milkings is useful transition milk? I suppose how many milks are you talking about that to get?
Yeah, so what is transition milk?
What is transition milk? Yeah,
Yeah, it's the first look. It varies. It can vary. Maybe in heifers, you might look at it. It might be a bit less, but you're typically the first 2 to 8 milkings is deemed as transition milk. You'll see the consistency of the milk change around the six, seven, and eight milking.
very good. Thoughts on once a day feeding after 28 days, managing the transition from twice a day to once a day feeding.
A good question. I think I've been on farms to do once a day feeding and get on really well. What it enables is a rapid development of the rumen. You have to be really good on all other management factors because that it's usually done abruptly. I haven't seen any research on the best methods, and I'll ask you your opinion on it, on how you do it. Um, the challenge with once a day feeding is it really saves time, um, but you're asking the calf biologically to do something quite difficult. And if something else breaks, like weather, hygiene, or disease, calves, you can just see the difference in the severity of disease seems to be always higher. That's always my risk. But I have been on farms that do a really nice job on once a day, but they're so trimmed up on everything else because maybe they've improved the time efficiency on feeding and they put it into that system. So um, I think the research is telling me we'll be doing it less and less in the future. And I see people who were doing once a day feeding now feeding calves a lot more milk. So it was on trend a few years ago, and I think we'll be moving away from it. But if it's working for you, fine. Your thoughts on transitioning to once a day milking?
Yeah, I suppose and you mentioned it through the presentation, Tom, if you look at future performance and this whole early life programming, so trying to really maximize growth for the first 12 weeks, and the research shows that that has an impact on future milk production, future fertility. Um, so I wonder is the time you save worth it? But it's easy again, it's easy to say that. I suppose yeah, on a PowerPoint, but yeah, and I've seen farms too that seem to do a very good job and have very well grown healthy calves and doing it well. But
Well, if I was to make my prediction in 10 years' time, the trend will be 12 week plus weaning, 6 to 8 liters minimum. That's where I think the science is going. And not just the science, that's where I see a lot of farms going that are just reading, they're watching their calves, and they're thinking ahead. I think that's where in 10 years' time, I'd be very surprised if that's not the norm.
Okay,
I'm around to see it.
we've kind of covered this with feed transition milk for how many days? So you're saying kind of around the
It
week
depends
mark.
on your system and how much transition milk and how you can manage and how easily you can manage it. But it's a valuable resource if you don't have you own it. You made a great point on mycoplasma. I think probably that point on mycoplasma and waste milk was really worth mentioning again. But yeah, are you using it at all? Are you using it a bit? You often see if there's issues with scour post vaccines, and you're talking about vaccines. A lot of times company will go in and say, well, you haven't actually. If you read the label, you need to feed the transition milk. So from that perspective, it's important.
No, very good question here. You were talking about the cold weather earlier on. So how much extra would you feed calves in cold weather to avoid upsetting their routine?
That's a good question.
So if they
Chagas,
were on if they were getting the 6 liters, which is a nice happy medium to be giving you, three
yeah,
liters
so
a day.
there's a nice equation online, and I should remember it. Chagas have it. Basically, you could probably, as a rule, okay, it's a down on 5 degree gradients, but let's just say it's going to freezing time. You could easily put those calves up to 7 liters. If you put them up to 8 liters, probably a little bit much to ask them. But if you're putting up maybe 6.5 liters, 7 liters if they need it, if it's getting cold, it does seem to help. Massive changes do cause problems, but those slow, gradual increases. So if we're watching the weather, I'm from a part of the world where watching the weather is kind of, second nature to us. We love it. So I think if you're watching the weather, you see a cold spell coming, ramp up the feed, from 6 to 7 liters. You can go a little bit higher, and it's a small adaptation. That extra bit of straw works as well.
So if milking once a day in February, can whole milk be fed cold or heated? Or can be fed both, I suppose, but which would you recommend, cold or heated, for the afternoon feed?
So cold or heated. So again, biologically, it comes out of the heat at 37 degrees for a reason. Calves can tolerate cold milk quite well. But what they need to adapt to is being on cold milk consistently. You don't want to up and down it. If you're let the calves tell the story, I would be inclined to heat it if you can at all. I'm not sure I've answered that question correctly, or maybe are they talking about heating it and causing spoilage? I don't know. But I think from a calf perspective, they do well on warm milk. But if they're used to cold milk, they do okay too if the volume's right. Did I
Yeah,
answer that correctly?
yeah. I think they're asking can it be fed cold or heated? So they're asking for your opinion, Tom. Yeah,
Yeah, well, I think it comes out of the teeth at 37 degrees.
yeah.
Nature doesn't
So
make mistakes. So
heated is
it,
the preference.
it,
So when it
it
does,
is the preference. Like
yeah,
it's same with colostrum. If you put 3.5, 4 liters of very cold colostrum into calf, the first job they have to do is internally is heat that up. It comes out of
yeah,
the teeth. Now, we can't mimic nature, but we do learn lessons from it.
yeah.
So yeah, you'd go for heated if you could.
I think certainly heated for the younger calves, maybe, but
Yeah.
um, yeah,
The calves
because
become more robust over time. What you
if
don't
there's a,
want is inconsistencies, up and down, changing in and out.
if there's a good, I don't know how many calves we're talking about here, but it would become a challenge to heat the milk if there's a good lot of calves there. Yeah,
Yeah.
but certainly for the young calves. What's Tommy's recommendation on the ideal milk replacer label constituents?
Oh, um, broad terms, animal proteins. Um, if I was looking at picking a milk replacer, somewhere between 24 to 26% in that range. Um, when you look at the lactose as well, making sure that the energy source is that's getting more difficult to read. If it depends on the breed, you'd aim for 18% minimum on 18% minimum on fat. If you're maybe a smaller calves and crossbred calves, there's a bit of merit in science, 20%. That's why the Jersey cows have such high fat and protein is from a nature perspective to get that fat into calves. So there is a difference there as well. I think God, that'd be my over. It's so hard and such variances to read. The animal protein source is key. I've got a bit lazy at milk replacements, but 4 or 5 I know that work very, very well on farm, and I always go back to them and
Mm.
recommend them.
And there's something in
Your
that.
thoughts, Dennis?
No, I think there's something in that as well. I think you certainly get what you pay for with milk replacer, and
Unfortunately, so.
yeah. Um, no, this is an interesting question. Tommy, any research done on milk replacers mixed with treated water, reverse osmosis, having an issue with calves' stomachs, i.e., upset stomachs?
So that's back to the water quality thing. Okay. So if we think about why is water quality important when it comes to automatic feeders and mixing milk replacer? Well, what we're doing with milk replacer, we're putting water in to heat protein and fat, often not animal proteins or animal fat. So we're putting it into a really nice mixture if you've got the wrong bugs in there. Okay. I don't want people going off and thinking water is the cause of all their problems. But when we think about water quality, it's definitely something that's an issue. When we think about treating water, there's lots of options: chlorine, hydrogen peroxide, reverse osmosis. We use that in our manufacturing to make sure we've sterile water going in. You've got to know if it's actually your challenge. Have you tested your water? Is there high TBCs in your water at source? That's one indicator. The next thing I put up on my slide was all the kind of trace minerals that can be a factor. Iron, sulfides, nitrates, they can also cause issues. But have you actually tested the water for high TBCs? If you have, you've got to do something about it, because if that water with high TBCs goes into milk powder, it's going to cause problems. Your options are reverse osmosis potentially, although expensive, but I think more farmers are investing because it seems to be a once-off thing, or some sort of treatment for your water potentially.
Okay, the next was on stomach should be every calf colostrum. We've probably kind of answered that. Calving pin next to adjacent to calves on a feeder. Um, I suppose.
Quickly, older stock have built up immunity to disease. This can still shed small amounts. So, in theory, we always, and a lot of people building calf sheds are moving them separately and treating calves separately. Where you have shared airspace with older stock, you have some risk of disease. We talked about mycoplasma, respiratory disease, potentially are the main ones. It's not ideal. Is there some way you can block it up? Will that work? Yeah, that's a well-known risk, older stock and younger stock being together. But your infrastructure is your infrastructure.
Hmm,
So you can only do what you can do with. So sometimes gale breakers, wind breakers are actually blocking off the side, so it's not so there's no sharing of airspace. That may help a little bit. I don't know, you're making people busy for nothing, doing jobs like that sometimes. But um, ideally with calves, and you'll see this on farm, they are better off away from older stock because they're monogastrics, they're immunologically naive, they're better managed in their own airspace.
very good. Where straw is expensive, what's your opinion on wood chip for bedding the older calves instead of straw?
Good question. Good question. I've got this a few times. Um, Prioritize straw certainly for younger calves. There's nothing insulates like straw. It's from a thermal heat capacity, I think is what it's called, or something like that, fancy like that. Nothing matches straw. When a calf gets to 3 to 4 weeks of age, their critical temperature actually drops close to 6 to 8 degrees. I think myself from the bit of work that I've looked at. So in theory, wood chip can work well for older calves. It's a bit messy and harder to clean out. They're probably not as prone to lying. If you're short on straw, prioritize it for the young and use wood chip for the older calves. If you're using wood chip, it tends to get very damp. Again, wood chip and people were using peat, you've got to have drainage really working well underneath it. And I think there's even variances in the type of wood you get to whether it soaks up moisture or not, but that's probably too fine a detail for people.
Very good. Do calves
Any
need a
thoughts
mineral
on that,
drench?
Dennis?
Hmm?
Any thoughts on that?
Yeah, or I suppose a mixture of both is some people are doing it as well, having the wood chip underneath to maybe improve the drainage and you might save a bit of straw on top, but um I suppose there's nothing to beat straw for the nestling, the nestling part of it, isn't it? And the thermal
Correct.
insulation, as you said. Yeah. And I suppose the shade would make a difference as well. If there's a I suppose a colder shed, maybe the straw is more needed than maybe a warmer type shed. Do calves need a mineral drench? When, ideally?
It's a good question. Done a lot of work with minerals over the years. In theory, if you're getting dry cow nutrition minerals right pre-calving, um, it helps. There's all sorts of theories out there on it. I think it probably becomes more important when they start coming off milk. In fairness, a lot of milk replacements will have a lot of micro and macro minerals in them. They'll have a lot of your common minerals and your trace elements. Um, it can be farm specific, and of course, we know when we go to the grazing season, one of the issues we see that may be contributing some of these calves is high molybdenum and low copper. So I suppose I think it's a farm specific thing. Would calves need a mineral drench before 3 to 4, 5, 6 weeks of age? Probably not. Probably gets a little bit more important as they approach weaning, or certainly a turnout, knowing what your grazing mineral deficiencies are.
Yeah, the good quality
Not
milk
commonly done,
sir.
I would say. But poor thriving calves. If you saw poor thriving calves, whether right or wrong, would have always used a liquid mineral drench or used some sort of bolus on those poor thriving calves as kind of part of maybe throwing the kitchen sink at them. But in theory, if a mineral drench for those poor thriving calves for recovery might help.
This is not a question now, Tom, but selenium, vitamin E for maybe more heavily, we're probably talking more heavily muscle suckler calves, but
So there's a lot of research on I traveled to France a little bit, and they seem to be very focused, even dairy cows, on selenium, vitamin E, and iodine, and its role in passive transfer. I struggle to find any real good papers on it. If you have a farm that is very low in iodine and selenium, and if you're seeing issues with calves, I don't know, is it an outside bet? I wouldn't get obsessed about it. There is that theory out there it may affect passive transfer. I could never really find papers on it to back it up, but it seems to be very commonly done there. But maybe someone from France would come to Ireland and see something we're doing and saying it's wrong. So I don't know.
your buddy Olivier Crane there, we met him and what did he say the mortality, the calf mortality was in France?
10%.
Yeah. Was it 8% or 10%? Yeah.
It was
So
high. It was very high.
yeah. So they have a bit to do, in fairness, to catch up with us on our calf rearing.
Yeah.
Some farmers moving towards leaving calves in on 2 to 3 kilos a meal and silage for a month post weaning. We're probably onto the weaning piece here now. Thoughts on this?
Go back to that subject matter again, I'd say in a more in-depth webinar. Yeah, a lot of that's why I think there's a problem. I think there's a lot of farms doing this. If it's working, maybe fine. People are talking about keeping cows again. Different farms, different things.
Mm.
You want to be careful maybe what you read online. Yeah, it may work for your farm. What's the calves telling you? The challenges with animals outdoors versus indoors. The disease risk challenge goes on. If you have a good calf shedding space, it may work for you if you're really challenged with grazing. But I think we need to go back again. We're using data from indoor systems on straw and concentrates, and we have a different system here. And I think from speaking with Chagas about it, they are looking at research in this whole area. This is the next phase. I think from some of their research, and maybe they did started some of it last year, on how we can adapt to the first grazing season a little bit better on farms.
Okay.
It's a webinar on its own.
Yeah. Um, no, Tom, can you use precision microbes with calf feeders? A calf feeder that uses quality milk powder, I suppose. Can you use precision microbes on feeders? That's the question.
Yeah, taking my biases out of it, of course, I would say yes. I think it's a tool. I think what you would say again, let the calves tell the story. But when you go even with quality milk replacer on for calves, it's a transition. So it's a transition from whole milk to milk replacer to a feeder. You're increasing that challenge in every calf is going to the 1 point. Microbes is a tool around all of those challenges and optimizing gut health, the impacts of stress. It's not just that digestive upsets, you're supporting average daily gain and all those things. I would say that it's like going into a Toyota Land Cruiser dealer and saying, "Our Toyota Land Cruiser is nice to drive." Yes, of course they are. Precision microbes does have a role, and again, look, so many farms are putting it in through feeding systems. Even with quality replacers, it has a role to play. Happy to answer those questions. I should have left my email as well, and contact details. Contact me, and I can go in, talk about that specific farm as well if they want to contact me.
Very good. So the next two questions now, I'm gonna, but the milk replacer, um, type of milk replacer. So I think we've covered them. So we'll move on. Is it important to keep colostrum in a covered bucket during the day?
Good question. So, covered bucket, is air the problem? Um, I think more so the cleanliness of the bucket is important than the cover and the length of time colostrum spends in it. So my estimates, and again, I tried to do some figures on this, is if you've got twice the fat and protein in colostrum, it will sour twice as quickly as normal milk. Okay. And now we can't compare that to the milk we buy in the shop because we know it's pasteurized. So just think about it. It goes off really quickly. So the cleanliness of the bucket, okay, putting a cover on it, does that help? It's the time the colostrum actually spends in the bucket and the temperature outside. And 10 degrees, 12 degrees, which we had a bit of early this week, is quite high. And when you TBC, those colostrums, they are quite high with bacteria. It's
Yeah.
maybe a finer point in the colostrum piece, but I think it's where a lot of farms need to go. They need to look at handling. And some farms who are managing a lot of colostrum have all big fridges and they're putting it into fridges. And I think that makes sense. You get a lot more time out of your colostrum.
Good one. Next question. How do you feel about colostrum replacers?
Mm. I visited the farms where they were made. There's a difference between a replacer and a supplement. So we were kind of used to supplements in this market, which are essentially not the same thing. They're amino acids and blah, blah, blah. So a replacer should be like for like. So essentially, what they do with the good replacers is they take colostrum from farms in Scotland, interestingly. They're free of TB and Johne's disease.
You want it, yeah.
And they freeze dry it. Actually, freeze dry it in Canada. So it's got a little bit of a sustainability journey, but they freeze dry it and then you make it up. It's the same thing. So very popular in all year round calving systems where you mightn't have a lot of spare colostrum and calving is less infrequent. They're quite commonly used. They work okay. I think in seasonal calving systems, manage your own colostrum better. They may have a role to play in the first couple of heifers calving in. You're trying to get a bit of sleep. They're useful from that perspective. Some farms that I visit in the UK are using them for every calving, maybe quarter bag, half a bag adding to them. That's a decision yourself. But you've so much quality colostrum coming in a seasonal calving system. Are they needed?
Yeah,
The difference between a replacer and a supplement, replacer and a supplement, and you
that's
see
a,
it in the price as well.
that's a big one. Now it is 9:30, Tom. We still have a good few questions. I'm happy to keep going. I know most people are still on, but I hate leaving questions unanswered. Are you happy to
So do
keep?
I. We should
Yeah.
never, in life, you should never leave questions unanswered.
So for all those still tuned in, we're going to keep going with another maybe 10 questions. And in fairness, out of courtesy for the people that asked them, we'd love to answer them. So
Yeah, no.
we'll keep going. Is chlorine suitable for cleaning, sterilizing automatic calf feeders?
Good question. Don't fully know the answer. What percentage of chlorine you're putting in? Chlorine's quite effective at low doses, but if you put it in too high, it's very hard on the gut microbiome. It's very hard on everything. And so I would be a little bit cautious on chlorine. I think, again, I've got lazy. I talk to guys who are in the space, who are doing it day in, day out, the technicians on the road. I would talk to your own technician, but my instincts would be avoid chlorine. If and again, if even if you're looking at header tanks, it can actually be useful to clean out header tanks once off with chlorine, but you'd flush them through. The percentage of chlorine is quite important. It's kind of chlorine's good, but it can be very hard if you get the concentrations wrong. And there's some really good products out there if you talk to your own uh, person that's
Supposed
what's
to,
that or your technician,
yeah.
your automatic calf feeder technician.
And the manufacturers generally have the products they recommend, I suppose.
Yeah, they do. They do. And in fairness, it's in their interest for the machine to work well. So they'll see what works well. And look, I think chlorine, I've heard of people using it, not that commonly, but you need to be careful with it because at high levels, it can be very hard on the gut
Yeah, very
and the
good.
machine.
What are your thoughts on mixing whole milk and milk replacer?
Interesting. I've only seen a couple of farms do it. Very interesting. I get to see. I'm very lucky. I get to see very interesting farms. I was with a farmer, and the videos on YouTube is a guy called Michael Going. Very interesting feeding system. Ad lib milk feeding system to an automated feeder. I think that's a trend that's going to be there because one of these guys is ahead of the curve, and he was adding milk powder to this. So he was getting these calves in 12 liters of milk, and he was adding milk powder to it, like which is metabolically driving them, and the calves were stunning. So. Does every farmer need to start doing that? No. I think if you're feeding whole milk and you're feeding it well and consistently to the right volumes, it may be complicating the osmolality of the thing and you need to have everything else right. So I would say proceed with caution. Look at your own system. If you're feeding whole milk's good. It's not everyone can do that. Now he wasn't putting a huge amount in there, but like everything else in the system was just tweaked to a level that I hadn't seen before, and the calves reflected that. I don't think it's something we need to start doing though, as a general rule. Welcome your thoughts, Dennis.
Yeah, I'd be slow to mix, to be honest. I'd kind of be on one or the other, for those reasons, osmolarity and mixing two different things. It's like mixing electrolytes into milk. I wouldn't be a fan of that either.
Oh no, that
Yeah,
doesn't work. You need to separate bulk electrolyte, water, and the hydration separate. Yeah.
no. I find most cows have less than 4 liters of colostrum at the first milking. Any reason these cows have so little?
It's a good question. Genetics. What I see sometimes it might be a whole pile more you can do, and it's very dangerous to give general nutritional advice. But some of the factors, whether it's a ewe or a cow, and we see it more commonly in ewes, is the protein percentage going into the cow in the dry period. Okay, you need energy and you need protein. I know you like this area as well, so I'd like your opinion. So typically, when your crude protein and silage is below 12%, it may factor into colostrum quality. Where I've seen cows supplemented in the last 7 to 10 days with a quality protein and energy source, not massive amounts, it can have a pretty good impact on colostrum quality and sometimes volume.
Yeah.
So I go back and look at energy and protein in the pre-calving diet, and certain breeds as well may need tweaking one way or another. It could be genetic, but I think there might be a little bit of gains to be got from looking at the nutrition pre-calving.
Yeah. Yeah, I would concur. And it's surprising that the energy demand is it goes up quite a bit in the last few weeks before calving. If you're into kind of energy units, UFL, maybe six for maintenance, and it could be 2.5 to 3 for the calf, you know. So there's a nice bit of energy needed towards the end, and then to make that bag of colostrum as well. So yeah, that's definitely the area you'd look at. Um, I actually logged out. Oh, I'm reading a question now here, and this is more of a comment. No, no, that's what do you think
I saw
of?
one or two questions coming in and they were a bit spicy, so I'd avoid them as well.
Okay, yeah. A question on vaccination. I haven't read these ahead now because I got sidetracked talking to you. Question on vaccination for crypto. You need to feed for 5 days. I think you get protection. We had an outbreak of Mycoplasma bovis pneumonia in weanlings last autumn. Am I better off minimizing transition milk and using a crypto oral dose or using the crypto vaccine and transition milk and then using Mycoplasma bovis vaccine? So it sounds like there was an outbreak of Mycoplasma in the weanlings last autumn. I think he's just looking for advice really about the crypto vaccine and the risk of Mycoplasma.
Yeah. So crypto vaccine, I'm observing it. Science is good. Vaccines make sense. Observing it from afar, it's a very much talk to your own vet around the risks on that one. I welcome your opinion to that. Mycoplasma, certainly you get a good hit off the vaccine the first year, but like you said, what percentage of your herds are tested positive with mycoplasma?
50%, but with clinical signs very rare. So I
Yeah.
suppose it's an
So
endemic
so
disease. Yeah. Yeah.
So it comes back to management. So maybe the factors that you need to look at are on the management side first around what is the impact of that crypto on the calves? How much did that set them back? Did that was that the thing that pulled the trigger on mycoplasma? You just see it then because it seems to be endemic in a lot of herds now. You may get a hit off the mycoplasma the first year round, but I'd be looking back at crypto management and calf resilience in the preceding period as well. Very farm specific questions that are hard to ask without walking into seeing the floor space, everything else like that when it comes to individual farms. You've got to get a sense of what's going
And
on.
obviously, the crypto vaccine is quite new in the market, but the initial feedback I hear anyway is positive, you know. So a real scourge of a disease. So
You
um,
need to throw everything at crypto. So I'm in that space. That peer review trial we did was looking at crypto. We didn't prevent it. We reduced the severity and improved the recovery times, which is fantastic. But again, it is in combination with hygiene management and all the decisions. And vaccination is another tool in that again. And we need all the tools kind of in seasonal systems because infection pressure is rising. And cryptosporidium is one of these diseases. One of these diseases I've looked at actually quite interestingly. If when we qualified a long time ago, very little crypto. Now crypto is the primary pathogen. It's the primary pathogen across Europe when you look at calf scour. So it seems to be these. And where is the source? Is the cow. The cow is actually the source of the disease. So in theory, I think vaccination over time. This is why I think vaccination over time might help. It may help eliminate the source, or reduce the initial source of the parasite because it's a protozoan parasite. Um, so I think that's where it could be interesting. But when I was doing a bit of work on farm, we actually took cows' dung samples and we looked and we found oocysts inside in the cows, one or two, but the calf is the multiplier then. So it's all the other regimes like hygiene. I tell a very long story about a lady who I met, and she stopped crypto on the farm. Why? Because she was an ex-carpet cleaner of 25 years and was obsessed with cleaning. She was the solution to crypto. So that'll tell you another story about crypto around hygiene and stuff as well. Complicated disease.
yeah, and I suppose what we didn't talk a whole lot was about the calving, the calving pen, I suppose, and the one thing we can do, like the calving pen is an adult environment, and you spoke there about the cow is often the source and the calf is the multiplier. But one thing we can do most of the time is take away the calf fairly quickly and get them out of the adult environment into a nice, clean neonatal environment, I suppose, with a red light and manage the colostrum and take the and manage it ourselves. If you're feeding 12.5% milk powder, would you go more than 750 grams a day, which should be the equivalent of 6 liters of milk? How much more can you go with powder?
Um, Trend I see in powder now is a kilo for a kilo. So a lot of farms are going to a kilo of powder a day. Um, be it 150 grams per liter, 125, hitting in around that 900 kilo mark. You can go there very easily. People do more than it. Um, Again, I don't want people going mad and feeding loads of milk to calves and getting all sorts of issues, but generally they won't. I think with powder, it's very simple. It's just the same. It's under 25 grams per liter because milk is 12.5% or yeah, 12.5% solid. So you're matching like for like. So just like giving more milk, you give more milk replacer. Where am I seeing trends? People are getting up to 700, 800, 900 a kilo of milk powder in some cases. And the beauty about that is if you have everything right, is that kilo going in or that 800 grams going in is going to deliver you 800 grams a day of growth, and you're never going to get that efficiency in that animal ever again. And that's aside from all that epigenetic stuff that I talked about that's long and boring but really exciting and the future lifetime performance, the memory development and everything like that. So it's just like for like. You just increase the volume as you would increase milk volume. But
Yeah,
you
that's
calves need to be on that volume by kind of 7 to 7 days, and they can do it. People are afraid that they won't drink it. They will drink it.
hmm. Yeah, I think that 900 gram, I think the 750 grams is um is a bit shy of where you want to be, to be honest.
Absolutely. I
Yeah,
mean, I think I've made my feelings clear on milk feeding.
you certainly have. Have been feeding straw to calves? Should I consider hay? This is a good question. And roughage, which straw or hay, Tommy?
It's a great question, and I naively didn't look at this for the last couple of years, and it was a smarter person than me that pointed it out to me. And it was that we do take a lot of our data from indoor systems. So the calf is weaned on straw as the primary forage, but
Hmm.
hay is not actually a forage, and we're putting the calf out the grass, which is a forage. Hay is a forage. So I don't know. I think hay got a bad name somewhere along the way. And haylage. Is it something more farms? People feed calfage and all this kind of stuff. Maybe it's something we need to incorporate. I want to ask the question as opposed to making changes on farm. I think that's key. But if post weaning is now our challenge and the adaptation to forage, and you even see it in calves that are weaned on grass, so they're out maybe 4 to 6 weeks and they're on grass, they still get bits of issues with summer scour. So weaning is only part of that piece. But it's an interesting area to observe over the next 5 to 6 years, I would say. What's your thoughts on it, Dennis?
Yeah, I know Owen Ryan in UCD has moved completely to hay, to good quality hay. And I think the hay got a real bad name with the hay bellies, but maybe that wasn't just the hay's fault. Maybe there was a shortage of milk and calves trying to compensate,
There
eating
is
hay.
one paper for the boring people who like a little bit of detail. There's one paper in the 1970s on hay that had a negative, and for some reason, someone who didn't like hay has been spreading that paper around since then. There's very little evidence against hay. And I'm glad that the likes of Owen Ryan and other people are saying it because it was somebody in that sphere, not Owen, but someone else said it to me, and it's just like a light bulb. It's like straws is not a forage. We're weaning onto forage. So I think yeah, if you were looking, we'll be feeding more hay as part of our transition period. Now that I know there's more people saying it, Dennis, I don't feel like I'm on my own.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. And to be honest, I can't remember Owen's, but he made a very valid argument, but I can't explain it exactly now, but
He'd
he
be a
made,
very good guy to get back to talk about that whole weaning period again as well.
yeah. Right. We're nearly there now, actually. Would it be beneficial to give calves the option of an electrolyte drink overnight, um, in the blue bats?
Uh,
I would assume now she's talking about healthy calves here.
yeah.
Yeah.
Um, Tapering, I'm involved in electrolyte development. So, no, I would say that water. freely available clean water is sufficient. I think where calves need electrolytes is where they're dehydrated
Mm.
from scour recovery or getting upsets. If you're rearing and buying in calves and they've been in transport and that sort of stuff, if you're moving calves, from one unit to another, is an electrolyte feed depending on length of transport. That's where it's kind of valuable. I think it might be a little bit too much. Get the feeding right and have clean water. You possibly don't need to be feeding electrolytes and bringing extra work on yourself.
Is a suck calf feeding 30 mils of precision white cubs for the first week, or would you feed more? Creating crossbred calves, 45 to 50 kgs at birth. Thanks.
So I heard microbes. So the general rule on the microbes is 30 mils for 30 days to get over that digestive period. That's what we recommend. And again, you can reach out to me, info at Tommy the Vet, if you want to go into more details. But it's 30 mils for 30 days, kind of the minimum period to getting over that digestive upset and topping up with an extra 30 mils during digestive upsets. If you can find your way to YouTube and you don't mind the sound of my voice, there's lots more information there as well on Tommy the Vet.
They might just have enough for you after tonight now,
I
Tom.
think so. I think so, yeah. I think
Does
so.
taking too much colostrum from the cow in the first milking lead to milk fever?
Good question.
I think it wouldn't, if a cow was on the edge, it wouldn't help anyway, that's for sure. But
No,
um,
no, I'm just trying to think of the best answer to this in the sense that I think most of our seasonal systems have low calcium at calving. It's an issue. I think an older cow, first, third, or fourth lactation, I think she warrants an almost a calcium bolus. Certainly fourth lactation plus. Younger cows, no. But I think one thing we need to do to make life easier for ourselves is have a good milk fever management strategy. It speeds up calving for the calf and everything.
mm,
Um, so I would say, of course, if it's a 5 or 6 year old lactation cow and she's a big bag of udder and she's had milk fever before, you drain her colostrum, you're surely going to put her under pressure. But she's the kind of lady I'd hope that she gets a pre-calving bolus or calcium bolus. So you've
mm,
probably set off the risk of it.
very good. The final question, and as I said this the last time, another one came in. Would Tommy prefer to increase constituents as kind of a follow-on from the previous one we were talking about in 6 litres to 15% solids rather than increase the volume at 12.5% to get the extra milk powder in? So 15%, 6 litres, or I suppose, what are you talking, 7 litres or something at 12.5%. I'd have to get the
I
calculator.
suppose anyone who, and I appreciate if you stayed on this long, I think there's 100 odd people still there. All Tommy has is opinions at the best of times too, as well. So I have a very basic principle that nature does things for a reason, 12.5%. Where possible, I find that if that's stuck to, it works well. Now, there's farms that go up to 150. I think when you get up to 175 grams, you need to
Mm.
be really exact with your feeding measures because it
So
can cause lots of issues.
7.2 litres anyway, you're looking at to get
Yeah,
the
so yeah, there and thereabouts. 150 is a way of doing it to get to, I think what is it? 150 to get to in 3 feeds to get to 900 grams. When you increase osmolality of milk, you change the constituents. So you need a good quality milk replacer, and you need to be pretty accurate that if you're putting in 450 grams in the morning to the milk per calf, that you're really, and if you're feeding work it out that if you're feeding 10 calves or if you're feeding 100 calves, use some way of mass measuring the powder and checking it every so often because calves love consistency. That's my last message. I think last question. I'm sure there's no more after that.
That's it. I think the lady that was talking about the milk fever, I think she said she didn't get milk fever last year, so maybe it was more of a
A
thought she
general
had
question.
about, yeah, a general query, yeah.
No, cows should be able to
So,
tolerate colostrum and been milked out of them, but most of our seasonal systems have an underlying risk with calcium because of potassium levels in our silage and various other things. It's just a seasonal risk. It's a risk we have in grazing systems. Have a energy plan for your cows and a calcium management plan for your herd is really important.
so we're there. I think we've set some kind of a record on answering questions after a webinar, Tommy. But so I suppose on that note, I'd like to sincerely thank you for your time and your expertise and the energy you brought to the whole thing tonight. It was really enjoyable and really, really practical. And I hope people enjoyed it. So I think we've said enough. I will.
No, we said enough. I just like to thank you, Dennis, again. I could sit here chatting about calves all night. I know you have a big passion for animal health and calves and farming as well. And also thanks Maeve in the background, who we don't see there,
Absolutely, yeah.
for her help. She's brilliant in the setting up of the webinar. Yeah, and the whole Munster Bovine team. You're heading into a busy spring, and all the farmers out there. I hope you have a happy, safe 2026, and it's a good year for you. Milk price may be low, but things will change, things will get better, and the circle of life, the wheel keeps turning.
Wheel keeps turning. On that profound note, Tom, we'll end it. Thank you
Good.
very much and good night, everyone.